Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how I retouch this portrait using a complementary color scheme, called highlights and warm shadows. And for those of you who watch until the end, I have a small bonus. I'll explain how you can get the PSD file from this exact retouch with all the layers, so you can explore the structure and see how everything is built. So make sure to watch till the end. Let's start with skin cleanup. I'm using the spot healing brush here. The skin texture is already very nice and pretty clean, so I don't really see a reason to use the clone stamp or the remove tool. The remove tool can sometimes leave dirty artifacts, and in this image there aren't any complex areas where it would actually be necessary. So I'm just doing a quick classic cleanup with the healing brush. I slightly clean up the cheeks, a bit of texture on the forehead and above the lips, just enough to make the skin look more, let's say, velvety. Any color issues we'll fix later at the next stages. I really like how her natural hair and bangs look here. It's a very soft, slightly imperfect, lived-in style, and I want to keep that feeling. So I'm only cleaning up stray flyaway hairs along the edges. Just a few to make everything look a bit more polished without changing the hairstyle itself. Now comes the fun part, dodge and burn. I usually do it using curves and I'll show you my setup. But first, I always create what I call visual aid layers. These help me control dodge and burn better and clearly see what I'm doing. I create a separate group, add a new layer, fill it with 50% gray and set it to saturation blending mode. Why not black and white or gradient map? Because these adjustment layers affect RGB channels very differently, even on default settings. And here I want something that stays as close to the original image as possible, so I don't create extra problems or do unnecessary work. On top of that, I usually add a curves adjustment with 2 points. One helps with contrast, and the other helps me better see highlights and shadows. The exact position doesn't really matter. The goal is to adjust it so you can clearly see what you're doing. Now, let's set up curves adjustment layers for dodge and burn. For dodge, I lift the point position on the curve to around 100 input and 150 output. And for burn, I use the same values but mirrored. The important thing here is symmetry. Dodge and burn curves should have the same strength, so one doesn't overpower the other. It just makes the whole process easier and more controlled. I usually start with a brush opacity of 10%, but for this image, it felt too strong, so I lowered it to 5% in the process. The idea is simple. We brighten darker areas and darken lighter ones. I focus on creating a more smooth gradients on cylindrical shapes like the cheeks, so the face feels more dimensional, but at the same time, the skin still looks natural. I try not to overdo it, just remove or soften what actually catches the eye. And don't zoom in too much, otherwise it's very easy to go too far. The frequency separation step is optional, but for this portrait I decided to do it because later we're going for a pretty drastic color grading. I want the skin to have a softer skin texture here. Not plastic, not over-retouched, just a softer, more editorial texture that works better with strong color. I set up the frequency separation group by creating 2 layers named low and high. One is for skin tones and the second one is for working with texture. On the low layer, I apply a median filter, and on the high layer, I use apply image with standard settings for an 8-bit workflow, then set it to linear light. Just in case, I duplicate the high layer, attach it as a clipping mask, and keep it turned off as a backup. That way, I can always go back if I don't like something later. Then I use the mixer brush on a new layer that is located between those two layers. The main goal here is to slightly soften uneven areas on the cheeks and make highlights a bit smoother. In sped up footage, this might look harsh, but in the end, I lower the opacity to around 10 to 20%. It's very subtle, but transitions and gradients become much nicer. Next, I felt like the lashes could be a bit fuller. I don't want to paint them manually this time, so I decided to test a new AI panel inside Photoshop. I'm using Nano Banana Pro and generating lashes while also slightly enhancing the brows, keeping everything very natural and high resolution. The result was actually pretty good. I already did a test run before, so I'm copying the lashes from my folder. They were slightly stretched during generation, so I adjusted everything manually, aligning lashes and brows with the eyes and face structure using masks. Now we move on to global dodge and burn. I'm using the same curves setup as before. I simply duplicate the folder, clean the mask, and repaint everything from scratch where I need it. Once I'm done, I lower the opacity to around 10 to 20%. This time I leave it a bit stronger. I want the face to feel more sculpted and dimensional. I follow the same logic makeup artists use, darkening cheekbones, brows, and areas around the eyes, and brightening the forehead, nose, lips, pupils, catch lights, and highlights in the hair. Now we get to color grading. As I mentioned at the beginning, I want a drastic color grading based on a complementary color scheme. Complementary colors sit opposite each other on the color wheel. Here the main accent color is clearly red, and opposite to red is green. So I'm adding cooler, greenish highlights and warmer red tones in the shadows to enhance that contrast. I usually work with channel mixer, curves, and luminosity masks. For luminosity masks, I go into the channels panel and choose the one that gives me the most contrast, usually the blue channel. I select highlights, and if I want to work with shadows, I simply invert the selection. From there, it's a lot of experimenting with different adjustments, blending modes, and masks. This part isn't an exact science, it's very intuitive. The key is sticking to the concept: cold highlights, warm shadows. If something doesn't work, I just delete the layer, lower saturation, or change the blending mode, and keep going until it feels right. After that, I want to add a bit of cinematic feel, so I add noise, also called cinema grain. I create an empty layer, fill it with 50% gray, set it to soft light, and usually convert it to a smart object so I can tweak it later. Then I add noise. Sometimes I duplicate the layer to make the grain more complex, especially when combining different types of noise. Final step. Because of all the adjustments, the eyes ended up a bit darker, so I fixed that with curves. I slightly brighten the eyes, the nose, and the top part of the lips. This helps bring the focus back to the eyes and pushes the front planes closer to the viewer, making the image feel even more dimensional and 3D. And that's it. Now, about the PSD I mentioned earlier. If you want to get the PSD file with all the layers, follow me on Instagram and send me a DM saying free PSD. I'll send you the download link so you can check the layer structure and see exactly how everything is built yourself. If you have any questions or want to learn more about color grading, feel free to ask in the comments and I'll be happy to answer in the next video. Bye bye!